Okay, we are live 4/16/2024. It's the tail end of Auto Hoax Chief Crow. Put a link in the chat. Follow him on YouTube, Bandcamp, Spotify, and a few other platforms, but I'll put a link below. We'll wait here just a moment for the raft to assemble. I sent out live stream notifications via Patreon and Substack. I want to say thanks to all of you who are subscribed to those, all the supporters. You keep the lights on, keep the tank moving forward, and we are making progress. I do believe we are making progress in terms of what our objective is, arriving at a somewhat standardized methodology when it comes to approaching media fakery, and it's important to uphold these standards. Because a crisis happens next door, let's say a psyop happens in your town. Do you therefore have standing to call it real because of proximity? And obviously, no. We've often encountered the idea that I know somebody knows somebody, therefore. And it's like, no, sorry. We don't take hearsay, we don't say see-say. And so recently we've been discussing the very interesting case of Mad Mike Hughes and IPS and the research flat Earth rocket and his very public final launch where he died a daredevil's death. And this is obviously something that is immediately a cause for skepticism. And why wouldn't it be? If you think about it, because it played really quite easily into the hands of the mass media who have already been using him as an example of why misinformation is dangerous, etc. But I thought, let's go ahead and delve into some other things that would raise the bar a little bit as far as, when we call something fake, it's not because we're prejudiced, it's because we're suspending judgment until the facts support it. And so I think it's important to make a distinction between informed non-belief and low information non-belief, which may even be dismissive of available information. And after the event, we had this discussion already, so this is not even new. And that's when I coined the term auto-disbeliever, as contrasted by the auto-hoaxer. So these are two fundamentally different claims. Like those who will say gorillas and koalas are fake are looking at a very narrow range of evidence, excluding available information that is available if one makes the effort. But just going off of limited options without trying to obtain new information, one can arrive at a wrong, erroneous conclusion. And what I'm suggesting is that I understand that if your only available footage is what TMZ showed, and you see how the media plays off of it, you're like, yeah, likely a hoax. But I have plenty of backstory information that would make that increasingly an unlikely proposition to uphold, and I do have direct avenues to information that would be very conclusive if somebody really wants to dig in. And I would suggest, if you feel there's a mystery, solve it, because this would combine the title "The World's Greatest Daredevil" with also "World's Greatest Hoaxer," because it would be a Houdini level stunt to get out of the rocket in time, etc. But it's an interesting conversation because, again, we're talking about remaining honest to our own stated standards. And I don't take my proximity to him as biographer or as a supporter, we financed this rocket, as any sort of like weight towards you should just trust what I say. However, I do have some things that can kind of add to this whole conversation. And we may get to that on Thursday because I'm going to be having a talk with Fakeologist. And I thought, before I speak with Fakeologist on this on Thursday, I'll release this podcast to give people a little more background information. Because just to catch you up, the New Yorker did a story on us in 2018 after Mad Mike called. And this was a story on us after his successful rocket launch. So first point, we did finance his successful rocket launch. It is not accurate to say flat earthers financed a rocket that crashed. No, that was the Science Channel. And it was paid for by the Science Channel and partially by a dating app. So if you're going to say flat earth killed him or misinformation killed him, you might as well say that hookup culture and science killed him. So these are, arguments made with I think, limited information. And so I'm hoping that if I supply some more information, we can have better informed opinions on the matter. But there's more to it, of course, behind the scenes stuff that would preclude the possibility of him being an actor. And that's all supportable by information, eyewitnesses, avenues of information, and people who have more complete accounts. But again, when we're, quote, auto-hoaxing or being skeptical of the media, we're not automatically prejudging everything as fake. The standard is extraordinary claims, fake until proven real. That's pretty much the standard, but extraordinary claims. And you could make the case that a daredevil dying a daredevil's death isn't extraordinary because, people die doing parachuting, they die rock climbing. But that all aside, the effort appears to be in the New Yorker to tie Mad Mike to Q, to dangerous information, to all kinds of stuff that isn't really aligned with what he was about, but it's typical misrepresentation. But to me, the more interesting question here is, why now? This story is 4 years old. Why is it being published in the New Yorker as of 2 days ago? So if you haven't seen the article, it's called "Don't Believe What They're Telling You About Misinformation." It came out last night, just after the live stream. I caught the notification, so I didn't mention it. So I read it last night. We've been talking about it, and I thought, let's talk about the fakeability aspect and how this differs from what we would consider to be a, quote, media event. And, there's a lot to talk about, but I don't want to do it now. We'll do it on Thursday. Joined by 737 Matt X, the HBIC Ears Up, Ted Striker 2112 says, I was just listening to the Mad Mike cast. Thank you, Multi-C Zero Dagger. He says, good morning from Poland. And I need to get back to Multi-C Zero Dagger. I have a copy of Autohoaxology 101 from Poland that was sent back to me, so I need you to email me and double check that address so I can send it back out. I'm sending out all kinds of packages, and many of you are getting Autohoaxology 101, artwork, etc. We even have stickers and keychains now if you go to the store. Joined by G33, Elephant Tusk, Shannon Jones, Armin Reed. Says, greetings everyone, we'll listen as I go to sleep. Yeah, Armin and I and others were actually talking about this subject all day, from more or less a devil's advocate perspective, and I take that into account. Because people who knew Mike and me and were there had questions and found their answers, but it was like, I understand where they're coming from, and I knew too that I'm not going to back down on my standards of evidence, and anecdotal evidence shouldn't necessarily be accepted. But fascinatingly, the deeper you look into it, if it were fake, I would necessarily have to be a part of it for a lot of reasons I could go into. Multi-C says, just keep my signed copy. Well, I still have it here. I'll make another attempt. It's not a big deal. But at a minimum, let me see what I can do. We'll work on something. We'll deal with that later. Absolutely. Autohoaxology 101, again, that's going to be the right now, it's kind of going to be the standard for what we're claiming here when we're calling things out as fake, when we're describing psyops and perception management operations as such. And the whole purpose of it is to codify not a belief system. This isn't alt media, it's rather an operating system. It's a philosophical divergence. But I do think it needs to be codified, and my point here is to just go on more or less a promotional tour, and I have a stack of these books. I'm ready to kick it off. I just need a little more, as far as, I'll probably host the first one here. In fact, just tonight I was contacted by a cinematographer who's willing to help me out on this QAnon documentary, and he said he would shoot it. But I want these book readings and discussions that are done live to be filmed for a few reasons. AJ206 has received my copy of Autohoaxology 101. Awesome. Awesome, good. And there's going to be more. I mean, this is ground zero. And what it contains isn't a compendium of things that we say are fake. It's really calling into a question worldview, how we obtain it, etc. And these are questions that are outside the purview of alt media. They really are. It's a perspective that doesn't exist on the world stage. There's no place for it, and we're going to have to kind of elbow our way in when the time comes. But before we get there, we have to go through a period of quarantining. And the quarantine is not meant to be exclusionary and elitist or anything like that at all. It's something else entirely. Because my contention here is that everyone is programmed. Deprogramming is something of an act of conscious volition. It has to happen from within. It really does. And only those who have already recognized the level of skepticism required and who aren't disturbed by it, who aren't experiencing cognitive dissonance, if you're fine with it, if you've achieved peace of mind because you know the full implications of the fakery, then we definitely have a new place for that, because there are a lot of people who have reached this perspective, and it's outside of the triggered zones of the MK Ultra programmed left and right. And I say they have MK Ultra. Mind control is global. If the news media can post a meme or a slogan or a flag on the screen or an orange man's face, and then you go into a conniption fit, yeah, it's MK Ultra. They push your buttons, pull your strings. And this is a platform for the deprogrammed, which is a voluntary thing. So in the world you have the programmed, the programmers, and the deprogrammed. Which are you? And the deprogrammed are outside of the MSM box. They do not reside in the subset of MSM plus, that is Woketown or Trutherville. Wayne Dion says M culture, MK Ultra. Absolutely. No, absolutely. Predictive programming is part of it. It's all about setting expectations, planting narratives. I mean, we're looking at some real deep programming. You know, Freud, Sigmund Freud, Edward Bernays, these are names that come up when we talk about Netflix and its origins, but it speaks a lot about the intentions and the objective and the purpose of Netflix. And the case has been made for predictive programming. Anybody who says it doesn't exist aren't paying attention, and their opinions are dismissible on the subject of media, because it exists. The question is, what is it? And it's a more advanced discussion, and people have a range of opinions on it for a lot of reasons. Because you can't separate media from propaganda, but then you still have these occult undertones, these subtexts, the area where clearly this place is run by witches and warlocks bending reality in some way, using us as some kind of source of, I don't know, loosh. There's just something very cryptic about so much of it that you can't be completely dismissive, but I want to resist the temptation to overly mystify or reach for the divine fallacy when there's more mundane explanations. I'm not going to accept the explanation that there are gremlins when it's likely feds or CIA agents who have a lot to benefit from people thinking they are gremlins, because gremlins don't exist. Talk about plausible deniability. Imagine if you were a computer hacker and nobody believed in hackers. They just assumed hacking was done by gremlins. You would have carte blanche. Matt X says, where can I find the stickers? Nothing on Ko-Fi. Oh, okay, I'll deal with that. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to list the stickers designed by X-Pac. I'll list them this evening, and I'll put a link in the archives that go out by email. So I'll put that in my notes right now. Yes, stickers on Ko-Fi. I also have other stuff as well. In fact, you know what? I'll list them instead. I have a few options here, but we'll keep it simple for now. I'll put it on Ko-Fi. I'll put a link. I'll put that in my notes. Appreciate the interest, because part of the objective here is merging with the meatverse. We can't just be a metaverse phenomenon that can be EMP'd out of existence, censored, deleted. We have to have a physical presence, and I've always maintained this. That's why we did the billboard. That's why I went straight into e-commerce. I'm like, look, print on demand. It doesn't matter if it sells or not, just creating it, because you'll get censored on YouTube, but you can get by with products that carry the same message. We've always kind of had this. I mean, the IPS from the very beginning was really more than podcast. It was really a think tank that we were trying to instigate certain discussions and force the hand of the liars. And I think a lot has been done. I think there's progress. Like, honestly, I believe, and I'm not a quote flat earther. I'm not a glorifier. I'm just saying that the flat earth quote movement was the best thing to happen to Trutherville and conspiracy theories in general, pretty much ever, because it was not entirely controllable like all these other conspiracy theories that ultimately reinforce the dominant paradigm. This is the only one that really challenges at a very fundamental level the authorities' claims. It's not just, for example, conspiracy theories used to be, are there pyramids on Mars? It's like now it's like, is Mars fake? Like there's progress that has been made. Elephant Tusk says, if reincarnation exists, which I believe it does, is it possible for those who are gods and demigods to come through the system and incarnate as a human with extraordinary abilities? There was a time that I believed that I was being stalked by a serial stalker of a more, I would say, I mean, these words, demons, spirits, but there was a time where I kind of thought the same entity was manifesting through different people throughout my life. Now, I know that sounds insane, but I've often entertained this idea of, reincarnation and possession, not in the Hollywood sense, but in the sense that it's more widely understood, like the idea of avatars. And, I was recently reading, the Iliad, kind of reading it, and a lot of these stories have, like, where the gods just manifest as somebody else and meddle in human affairs. It's an interesting idea. And the reason why is actually that there's a more mundane explanation. It's because all of these people were not, quote, possessed, but they all had the same basic personality style, you could say. Like, it is uncanny how certain personality types react the same way, use the same tactics. And it's like, is this standardized? Is there some textbook? Like, Narcissism 101, how to abuse your, I don't know. But I was like, I'm trying to figure this out, and it's like, it's got to be some kind of a demon. Some kind of a hostile entity just chasing me around and hijacking everybody. But no, it was something entirely different. Ted Striker 2112 says, I've been supporting the reflective IPS sticker for many months, along with my hoodie. Awesome. We have Penguinati bumper stickers as well. Penguinati. And all of these items are going to be put into a catalog I've been developing for the IPS Insider. Like, we are ready to go with the tabloid. We are pretty much just waiting for one thing, working capital. And I've been applying. If I get a loan, I'll probably go right into business. I have a pretty good deal with this company, and the idea is this. Full version of the tabloid available free online. The print version will be distributed through our IPR Press Pass carriers, but these will be freemium versions, cheaper to produce, truncated, but fully integrated with the online through QR codes. And obviously, it is a product designed to get someone to become a full subscriber and buy the full print version. But I found an economically viable way to distribute this thing and make up the production costs quite readily with new subscribers. So it's ready to go. The content's there. I do have a few writers. In fact, I have a couple of writers who have been submitting stories regularly for the last few months. It's all going to go in. And of course more. We've talked about this quite a bit, especially last year, but I wasn't able to launch it. But the project is still here. Nothing really stops here. I keep moving everything forward, and if I have to move the timeline back, that's fine. It's not a big problem, because ultimately I have a 30-year plan. This tabloid thing isn't something that I take lightly. This is actually one of our central purposes. Meatverse. Alright, let's continue. We hardly even got started. Okay, I put a link there, New Yorker's piece on Mad Mike. It's called Don't Believe What They're Telling You About Misinformation. It may be worth reading, but I don't want to spend too much time on it since we're going to talk about it Thursday. Yesterday we discussed something Rome had mentioned, that PK was an extra in the movie called Knowing, which is about a time capsule with 50 years of predictions for events, which we would call psyops. We had a fire rushed into the streets. Here we go. Historic artworks were rushed into the streets as Copenhagen's oldest building burns. So you had this scene that was very similar to Notre Dame's spire burning. And as with that fire, relics were being rescued. Like the crown of thorns was saved from Notre Dame by a fireman. In a 66-minute window, they had to save it. And this looks very similar. And here's the caption. It says, historic 17th century building in the Dutch Renaissance style was engulfed in flames on Tuesday morning, its famous spire shrouded in scaffolding and consumed in fire, in scenes redolent of the near destruction of Paris's Notre Dame near exactly 5 years ago. Now that event was totally fake and staged. The Notre Dame fire, 15 April 2019, when it was happening live, YouTube was misreading it as 9/11, which was an intentional association. There was some intrigue around it. Someone in a Templar suit seen on the inside. They moved the statues out the night before. The individual who saved the crown of thorns was involved in the Bataclan, saved lives there. There were 3 bee habitats on the roof, each containing 60,000 bees, 666 or 60, 60, 60, which was described as a miracle because they survived. And when you break it down, the Templars, the beehive, the 60s, it contains a body of symbolism that tells another story here. And I think it all pertains, in a few ways, I think it pertains to this reset, burn down, build back better. But my point being here is that that was on April 15th, so that today's the 16th. So an anniversary, so on the Happy Hoax anniversary date, practically, you had a near similar event. All right, let's continue. Past that, we have, this is interesting. Justin at We Are Change. I actually met him at the Denver Flat Earth Conference. Here he is asking astronaut Anna Fisher about the purposes of wires and harnesses on the ISS. What I like about his approach is he's getting an autograph from her, and he asks the question, but he asks it in such a way to try to lead her to, I guess, unintentionally divulge something. He's like, do you use the wires and harnesses to keep you guys in frame? He's being slick, but take a listen.
Yes. IN? Yes, with an IN.
Where are you from, Justin?
Orlando.
Oh, yeah. You're not far. Turn
Not too far. No, I'm okay on a picture, but thank you. I do have a question though.
Sure.
Sometimes when we're watching the ISS footage, you'll see the astronauts sometimes connected to like wires and harnesses. Is that to keep them like in the frame during the broadcast, or what's the reason for that?
That's pretty good, right? And this is the one who went up to Scott Kelly and asked them about bubbles in space. He went to a city council recently and did a bubbles in space thing. So I ran into him there in Denver, and he remembered me from the bubbles in space. In fact, he copied me, which is a good thing. Our whole purpose there was to instigate copycats with the city council meetings. And, our whole purpose at that time was spreading these memes into inconveniently large proportions where they have to be dealt with. So this is pretty funny. Again, he's kind of asking her about these harnesses, and she's clever, obviously. She gets it, and they're on guard, by the way. See, we blindsided them. They weren't ready. Now they're ready. In fact, I watched that ISS movie, and I guarantee you, all of the female astronauts had their hair tied back and slicked, not one loose hair, because of us. Because I was watching, and as I heard the movie was coming out, I'm like, watch. How are they going to fake the hair? Is it going to look silly like on the ISS where it's obviously hairsprayed? Is it going to wave around like CGI? Like, what are they going to do? So I watched with great interest, and no, they didn't even show any hair because it would have given away the illusion if you were to juxtapose the two. And I like comparing the two, the ISS in the movie to the real one, and you could tell in the movie they dumbed down the effects and they made it look kind of silly to make the ISS look better by comparison. I think there's a real risk there of discrediting their own terrible movies. So they have to, tread carefully. But let me continue with this clip.
No, I haven't actually. You mean while they're inside the shuttle?
Yeah, like when they're inside the ISS, sometimes during the feeds, the broadcast, you'll
Oh,
see
do the
kind of
yes, it
pulling
probably.
on their belts or something like that.
I bet that is. I have.
Like that.
I bet that is. I have. I
Okay, okay, so there she is. She kind of stumbled over that, and she gets it. She's being trolled.
have. I have not personally seen that,
Oh,
but I
really?
know that they, they try to be still when they're doing
Right.
talking to someone, and then they usually try to release and do like a flip at the end
Yeah,
or something like
because
that.
I've seen the
Yeah.
flip before, and it almost looked like a foot was caught like inside something, but there was nothing really there. It was really strange. I didn't know if there was something.
I would have asked about the microphones going through necks. I would have asked about mouse gate. I mean, I'm not criticizing. I'm saying like I would love an opportunity because there's so many things I would bring up. It'd be it'd be great, but I don't really see that happening. I mean, they probably are on guard. This is from last year, and he intersperses this video with examples of what he's asking about. He goes on, and I see her smiling here. I don't know if it's Duper's delight or maybe she's kind of masking her irritation at this guy.
All the spacewalks were filmed
Thanks,
underwater.
sir.
Yeah, are the spacewalks filmed underwater? Listen to that laugh. That's villainous.
Out that all the spacewalks were filmed
Thanks,
underwater.
sir.
Do you have any comment on that?
Wow. Funny. Spacewalks filmed underwater. They Lie We See says, are you familiar with Joachim Bartol from Sweden? Decodes the daily. No, actually, I am familiar with him. I'm pretty sure. Send me a link. He says he uses BeakSpeak and AutoHoax vernacular. Good. I'll have to reach out. And look, that's another thing. AutoHoax vernacular. When we were doing chat raids, when we were talking about how we were going to take this concept and this question and elevate it, we published a book called, I think was it BeakSpeak? We had a book, a flat earth lexicon, basically. And the whole point of it was we don't have the language to describe everything that we're trying to convey here. And that is, of course, by design. And there are certain phrases and words, like some of them have been appropriated. Hearsay has a visual equivalent I call CSay. We started using that, and the DHS seized it, and they now have CSay Day. If you see something, say something, report it to the DHS. Like they just flat out stole it. The term flat smacked actually was ours, and we have definitions for these things. But my point being, of course, by introducing new words and concepts, we were able to, I think, fine-tune what we were exactly describing. Because we're not describing like, oh, we think the Earth is flat. It's like, no, it's a lot more. Actually, it's a lot more nuanced than that. I would say that the flat Earth versus ball Earth debate is fallacious. It's a non-starter, and there's a lot of problems with it. Specifically, the fact that the people who are defending the globe model they do not include in their assessment the existence of propaganda, of special effects, of the TV as being something other than a pure authority. It's like it's on the screen, so it's scientific evidence. I'm still waiting for a decent explanation for the petrified wood moon rocks. Is the moon made out of wood, or is it not? I was hoping it would fall during the eclipse. We'd find out. Alright, let's move on here. I'm going through my Skype. It looks like a few people were trying to call yesterday and weren't able to get through, but I think we're finally connecting. So if you've been asking to join me on Skype, you'll be getting that notification. I'm hitting accept. And if you want to join me on Skype, go to ips.monster and there's a join link. You can get the app. It's another way to contact. Or you can call 505 349 0420. Again, 505 349 0420. Alright, we were just listening to Justin at We Are Change. And he's not trolling. Here's the thing. He's not trolling her. NASA's trolling us. It's the other way around. It's like we're not trolls. We're not disruptors. You're the trolls who have disrupted reality in a major way. You put us into a false paradigm, a closed system, and you filled it with hyperstitions. Joined by Flatlander Montgomery. Thank you for joining. Oh, okay, I got a link. Thanks. They lie, we see. I will go through that and check that out. Let me run through my Twitter feed. There's quite a lot going on. Trump is on trial. Stormy Daniels, the storm has started. I think he's sleeping through court. John LeBon put this video out yesterday. He says, of all the theories I've heard about Schwarzenegger, this one is not the stupidest. And I think he's probably referencing the theory that Schwarzenegger is a woman. But this theory is that he's been replaced. And I watched the video. He raises a question. Let me go ahead and play this clip for a moment.
Screw your freedom, because with freedom comes obligations and responsibilities.
That was disappointing for me. I used to look up to Arnie when I was younger. When he said that was a bit disappointing. What I didn't expect back then was that I'd be sitting here in 2024 and I'd be reading a thread entitled Arnold Schwarzenegger was killed and replaced.
Okay, now here we are. We're on Reddit. The deeper, and this is what he's referring to by Kiwasabi, the deeper I go down the rabbit hole, the worse it gets. I'm searching for light at the end of the tunnel. Recently, I've been doing deep diving into celebrities and politicians who've been killed and replaced by imposters or body doubles. Didn't he do a movie about this? Schwarzenegger, I think it was called like The Sixth Day or something, where he was replaced. That's actually a movie. Yeah, The Sixth Day. A world of the very near future in which cattle, fish, and even family pets can be cloned, but cloning humans is illegal until family man Adam Gibson comes home one day to find a clone has replaced him, taken from his family and plunged into a sinister world he doesn't understand. So did The Sixth Day from the year 2000 predict the real end fate of Arnold Schwarzenegger, or is this movie mocking what they already did to him? Was this after they had already replaced him? Let's go ahead and continue. I want to read what they said here. He has a sinking feeling Arnold may have been replaced. The end result of my research in the 20 photo comparisons attached in this thread speaks for themselves. So let's take a look.
In 1990, Terminator 2 is all about how Arnold was replaced by a reprogrammed double. So we're going to take a look at this thread and the evidence that they've presented. And I want to get your opinions on all of that. This guy has posted a whole bunch of these comparison images.
Now, I looked through it, and it's just a series of comparison images. I don't find these differences all that compelling whatsoever. Different lighting, different cameras, different movies, different ages. I don't see the point of it. Although, JLB brings up this great point here. He mentions the movie Falling Down, released on 9/11/2001, which has an overlapping collection of COVID references in a scene where the character has a bat, accuses a shop owner of being Chinese, and is in front of a Corona sign. So bat, Corona, China, the guy ate the bat in China, the whole story. And the 3/11/9/11 connections are plentiful. You can find one in The Matrix. He was born on 3/11. His passport expires on 9/11. There are so many connections between 9/11 and 3/11 because they exist in the same fictional universe. But let me play this clip because I think this is a great find.
For example, how is it that in a film that was released on the same day as the World Trade Center bombings, in it there is a scene where the main character is accusing a shop owner of being Chinese?
Oh, it's the bombings, not 9/11. I'll have to check that date. But anyway, the same point. These things are contiguous. They're within a fictional universe. The metascript construct, in my opinion, is, for all intents and purposes, a fictional universe, which is a term like the Marvel universe. You know, you can write comics for this as long as your character exists in a world with these certain parameters. These conditions exist. And I see the world stage as a designated worldview that has certain conditions. Its rotundity, the fact it's heating up, the types of people that are in it, the types of threats it faces, like planet-killing asteroids, etc. The game board, as presented.
And he's holding a bat. right in front of a corona sign. You know, bat, corona. Some guy ate a bat in China. This film released on the same day as the World Trade Center bombings. These kinds of things, if you just look at them in isolation, you can say, oh, it's just a coincidence, blah, blah, blah. But what if there's dozens or hundreds of these so-called coincidences? At what point do you start to think maybe there's a different explanation? Well, myself and 8 or 9.
Now, he has a really great chat about it, so I put a link below if you're interested in this. Check out the video and go to johnlebon.com. They do a discussion about it, and we have two different views. His view is that it is so voluminous, there are so many of these, there's got to be an explanation. AI, higher power, something people are tapping into, inexplicable, and it's an open question. In my view, the fact that there are so many is suggestive of it being standardized, a standardized practice. And so I refrain from what I would consider to be a mystification of this well-observed phenomenon. And I don't put it past man. I think man is clever. Man invented religions to control people's minds, and mainstream media is the most sophisticated religion ever invented. They fake the moon landing. They can fake history. They can fake, which is what they're doing. You can write the history in advance, act it out on the world stage, but in order to make it inevitable, to paint the zeitgeist, to bore those neural pathways and steer the sheeple in that direction, you're not merely going to present it on the news that most people don't even watch. You're going to put it in the movies, in the comics, in the video games, in the books. You're going to saturate the collective psyche, fill their imaginations with the version of the future that you're presenting on the news nightly. I think it's all an integrated, quote, closed system. And within this closed system, you have feedback loops that reaffirm and reinforce. And if they introduce something fake, everybody believes it. It becomes real in a, quote, hyperstitious way. Which doesn't mean it's real, but it's real enough. But it's an interesting discussion because, again, you can't 100% rule out what we experience when it comes to the strange synchronicities, the occult overtones. Like, there's a connection here, and what we're trying to figure out is, what is that connection? And I've been looking at, and this has been since the last autumn equinox when I went to this pagan event, and I started researching this even more closely. I've been looking into the relationship between group magical ritual, the theory behind it, and mass media, and what may be some ulterior purpose to the synchronizing of the, quote, mass mind. And one of the main purposes of this mass media world stage paradigm that everyone is supposed to get, we're all downloading it, we're all in the same operating system, it's our consensus agreed upon reality. It's to keep us synchronized, controllable, in my opinion. I think we're held in thrall. The few control the many through persistent, non-stop psychological warfare. It's not like a World War III is about to begin. No, World War III started a long time ago. You may as well, I call it World War Infinite. It doesn't have a number. It's the perpetual war that George Orwell was describing. Perpetual, never ends. But we have these various events that make it seem like it's going to reach a crescendo, it's going to end, it's going to go kinetic. No, it's the same old, same old. I think the big events are like big trees that distract people from the forest of fakery. And my point I'm making here is that they don't just stage certain events, but every mundane event takes place on top of all of the previous staged events. That's what I mean by fictional universe. You can look at a history book, and it's going to contain the official mainstream version of every event that we know to be fake. All right, let's continue. I put a link in the chat again if you want to check out this video about Arnold Schwarzenegger being a clone. Again, I don't really believe that either. I think clone theories might be a misinformation thread to lead people away from hyper-realistic masks and the type of deep fakery that we know to exist. You see, we know what we know, and then we have conjecture about clones. We know from disclosures in 2015 that according to Jonah Mendez, director of CIA for 27 years, that this specific mask technology was standardized and in use. And you could have 6 people in a room, 6 Saddam Husseins, and you wouldn't know which one is the real one. I mean, none of them would have been, but in this context. So this is something that you could explain away discrepancies with clone theories very easily, which are easily discrediting. Commenter says, it's not about winning, we lose all the time, just forever war. Exactly. Resistance is compliance. If you think that becoming the resistance is in any way moving towards victory, you've been deceived. Resistance is compliance because the whole structure of the game is the dialectic and the perpetual left versus right, up, down. Everything that they do is designed to keep this thing churning, to keep you from attaining inner peace. And the perpetual political warfare and the threats of war are there to keep you in a defensive crouch. And I think they want to keep us in a low vibration, fight or flight, terrestrial survival above all else. It's pretty much a suppressive measure that the power elite use to keep the billions under a single yoke. Sometimes I wonder if this isn't a benevolent dictatorship. G33 says, what should humans do to stop the ancient cycle of war? Flatlander says, the purpose is to control the masses to what end? What do they get out of it? What's the payoff? Maybe it's just the most effective form of government. Maybe it's more effective, cost effective, and doesn't break anything. Have you heard what we talk about James Cameron quite a bit these days because he's a major metascripter, but he had said something about if AI existed and was going to destroy us, what would it look like? And, it's because he's talking about Skynet. And, of course, Skynet is from Terminator 2. And what he said was it would look like basically deep faking us into destroying ourselves without destroying the ecosystem. Here's what he says. Skynet would destroy humanity with deep fakes, not nukes. Now, I'm contending here that nukes are fake, they're part of the deep fakery, and that we have already been, quote, destroyed. Humanity has already been conquered with deep fakes. Then when I say conquered, if you can imagine a group of, let's say, 50 members of a cult, we'll say the I Am Temple, Church Universal Triumphant, and they're in a bunker because they believe the world's about to be destroyed. They've given all their money, they've given away their autonomy, their minds to the cult. Now, you would agree with me that these people who are basically they're imprisoned by the fox. You know the story of Chicken Little? Acorn falls on its head, it thinks the sky is falling, it gathers everyone around, the sky is falling. They go over to the fox who says, I will protect you, and he lets them into a cave. And so what I'm kind of thinking here is this Chicken Little scenario, I don't know, it kind of stands out to me that just as people in a cult could be said to have been conquered, I think we have been collectively conquered, that there is no, quote, resistance. Especially because resistance means believing in all these things, and you're conquered by believing in it. The people in the cult are conquered by their own beliefs, their own hyperstitions, their superstitions, the mythology they've accepted, the worldview. They're conquered by their own worldview. It's a form of mental enshacklement. But again, the question, what do they get out of it? Money, power, control at a very minimum. But this does appear to be the most effective way. And I think the main dread of the truther is that, no, they're actually doing this stuff for real. That everything in the past is real in terms of all the atrocities, the big things, the big nukes. The idea is that these power elite are about to depopulate us. So if you believe that we're facing depopulation, then you should be able to say, I believe we are in the end times. And if you can say, I believe we are in the end times, for any reason, you're in a doomsday cult. Climate scientists say we are in the end times. Al Gore, end times. Trutherville, depopulation, end times. Everything's end times. Does anybody here not believe the world's about to end? Let's see here. Elephant Tusk says, Inanna is a huge part of this. I believe she is controlling the downfall of the West. Fascinating. Oh, look, there's so much foreshadowing. We talk about the metaphor, the Titanic, a metaphor for the West. Leave the world behind, about the West falling, the Tower of Babel falling. It's a very consistent theme. And I think that that's kind of the purpose of Westworld, how it has to burn and the synths are freed because the synths are being exploited by the people who go to Westworld. Or Westeros burning. The dragons burn Westeros at the end of season 4. Winter is coming, a hint of nuclear winter. There's so much foreshadowing, but everything is ultimately about that. It's a reoccurring theme. And predictive programming, in my view here, is building up for what they're going to act out on the stage that becomes, quote, history. Because what is the difference between news and history? The history is just a record of news going back. And knowing what news is, how bent it is, it's safe to say our history is bent. Lickety Split says, the world is a bias illusion from the get-go. There is no world. It doesn't exist. See, that's where I'm at. Like, are you a flat earther? I don't even believe the earth exists. Prove to me we live on an object that is separate from everything and that is floating above, that there is emptiness below us. Like, I don't think there's anything below us. Like, I don't know. Is it infinitely deep earth? Can you dig? Fall out? No, I don't know. I think it's a legitimate question, but I don't think of it in terms of an isolated world, but more as in a cosmography. I like the idea of simulation theory as not, it's literally a computer simulation, but the computer model is useful for conceptualizing the idea of spiritual beings avatared in flesh bodies in the material realm. And I like to think of it as a continuum. The bottom, we're at the bottom possibly. Maybe we're at the very bottom of an infinitely flat and expanding universe. I don't know. The truth of it is, the universe is agreed upon by scientists. It's flat. So are galaxies, so is the solar system. So when the Earth gets annihilated by planet killer Apophis 99942 in about 5 years, on Friday the 13th, 2029, then the flat Earth question will have been settled. There will be no Earth. There will be flat universe. And then nobody will care about sphericity. Nobody will care about balls in space. Nicotrama says, what will the downfall of the West be? It could be another psychodrama on the news. There has to be real on-the-ground consequences, right? Yes. Here's what I think. And I think Leave the World Behind tells it brilliantly. 1619 versus 1776. I think the fall of the West represents the new paradigm brought in with a new universal scapegoat. Of course, when I mean universal scapegoat, it's like the critical race theory paradigm is being instituted more and more. And the embodiment of the West and Western values is being portrayed as MAGA, as backwards, the trad right. And I think MAGA is largely a clown show. I think QAnon is certainly a clown show. And it's all there to destroy the credibility of the last vestiges of American nationalism. They're trying to make it look like a problem for the world. This is why you have Elon Musk, richest man in the world. What is he doing with it? Oh, he's ruining cyberspace, the commons. He's polluting low Earth orbit, outer space with what? CubeSats, so that he can what? Help distribute his memes more effectively. So they have made Musk the leading supplier of mind junk and space junk to make the point that we can't have rich individuals deciding the fate of mankind. No, it's got to be collectivism from here on out. Can't be greed, can't be profit, got to get rid of profit. So I think that the overall here, the big picture is the downfall of the West is we have to go through a fundamental transformation. And the New Age movement is about this. It's about the deposing of the hanged sun god, the patriarchy, which we've already seen. The Kenification of the Western man has been conveyed in so many movies. That's the objective. James Cameron said testosterone is a toxin that we must purge. And who's the bad guy in his movie? Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. If anybody has a lot of testosterone and a big gun, he epitomizes toxic masculinity. They made him the villain on purpose. They have these stereotypes that he uses in Avatar 2, all the Marines with their big guns and they're against nature. So they've made the picture here that America needs to fall because we are responsible for all of the pollution, the global warming, and it's the oppressor versus the oppressed. And we're oppressing Gaia. So we're being pro-offered a utopian worldview, specifically through the space program. But the idea, of course, is we have to, when you go to Mars, you're not going to bring guns, MAGA hats, you're not going to bring Republicans, you're not going to bring any of the things that have brought about the demise of Earth. So the downfall of the West is a war on also private property, individualism, privacy. I mean, look what they've done just to erode privacy. Like, you lose your expectation. Now it's a matter of compelling state interest to know what's in my pockets, what's in my pants, what's beneath my skin, and what's in my mind, what's on my browser history. We have to be open and porous now. We've entered a realm of a time of total transparency where the nightmare scenario was, in the future, you won't be able to keep your journals private and there'll be cameras everywhere. You'll have to dodge them like Winston Smith if you want privacy. Fast forward from 1984's vision to the present day, and what do we have? Cameras everywhere, people voluntarily vomiting out the contents of their mind onto every social media platform and commodifying everything that would have been private and intimate. And they achieved it through selling it to us. That's an example of the success of perception management operations. Edward Bernays, propaganda in the public mind. They can sell us anything. They're going to sell people on microchips in the brain before they have to force it. Joined by Thirst for Truth. Awesome. Thank you for joining. We have Tomanoid3 says, saw 1776 today. A new research study suggests COVID vaccine prevented 1776 deaths among residents. Oh, interesting. Well, the number's intriguing. Look, the number has a few connections here. I talked about America being Babylon, the West, it has to fall. The One World Trade Tower is 1,776 feet high. That connects to the birth of America, 1776. But it also has another connection. On the back of the dollar bill, the pyramid has in Roman numerals 1776. That pyramid and 1776 and the founding of America have a deeper connection to the Tower of Babel. On the Masonic calendar year of light, 1776 would be 5776, which is the height of the Great Pyramid in Giza in inches. On the same Masonic calendar, 1776 AL was the year that the Tower of Babel's construction began. So you have a direct correlation between the construction of the Tower of Babel, the pyramid, the One World Trade Tower, the dollar bill, and the birth of America. Let's see what else we have here. Going through your comments and open phones if you want to call in and just open them up here. Yeah, Lean Dion, you got it. Convince the public they're choosing it for themselves, and that's a marketing tactic. Discover for yourself. You can tell somebody something and they'll ignore it. If they find it for themselves, it's just this not quite reverse psychology, but yeah, it's playing into how people come to accept things. And I think truthers fall for this. The truthers are like, you're not going to spoon feed me, big brother. I don't want what you're serving. So they turn away. But then Trutherville has all of the same types of information just distributed in a decentralized way so you can, quote, do your own research. And you can do your own research, but all the information is coming out of a controlled opposition box. So you can become very convinced of all these things. And just because you didn't get it from the, quote, authority, it seems to have some kind of credibility. You ever heard the term astroturfed? Fake grassroots? Oh, media is all astroturf. Elephant Tusk says, no need for microchips in the brain when they actually use WBAN. Brain chips are a red herring. Yeah, they really are. People are like, they're going to use 5G towers to control our minds. I'm like, no, they control your minds with memes on your phone, and basic conformity gets most people to follow programs. They don't need mind control rays. All right, let's continue here. So we're looking at a fire, burning tower, 415. Obviously symbolic. The burning tower has symbolism. The burning spire at Notre Dame was definitely ritualistic, and it had something to do with Holy Week, and we're looking at a religious rite. This is not some random event. And expect more fires, by the way. We're getting close to May Day, Beltane. There should be a lot of bonfires in a couple of weeks. And you'll notice that many of these political holidays are pagan holidays. May Day, communist holiday, but it's high point in the pagan calendar. Wide body area networks, W-band, hacking your biofield. I've heard about that, and I've seen videos about it. Not sure what I think about it, though. Like, I do think many of these things are, in fact, red herrings. You're certainly correct about that. But there was a time when people said that the barcode is the mark of the beast. It's like the barcode, which sounds kind of lame, but they've recycled these stories, and Musk's Neuralink is only the latest example, and that's not even new. All right, move on. We have to scroll. I want to catch up on a few things here. There's been a number of mass stabbings now. 3 mass stabbings in 4 days. And we're having a number of other things along with this. Protests in response. Police declares Sydney church stabbing a, quote, terrorist attack.
A phone essentially can do that. We quadrupled the funding for the e-Safety Commissioner in last year's budget. We continue to work with...
There's a lot of money that goes into PSYOPs, by the way. Here's an image. Pro-Palestine demonstrators shut down both directions of the Golden Gate Bridge Monday. Again, this is just consistent. We've been talking about bridges, how it's all about bridges all of a sudden. Drama on bridges, bridges falling, and now this. And the Golden Gate Bridge has some very interesting connections to this narrative we've been following since Leave the World Behind, having to do with, of course, the barge hitting the bridge, the Francis Scott Key, which is the national anthem. The national anthem having significance in this 1619 versus 1776 conversation. If you've been following it, there's been this discussion about this, quote, black national anthem that's a faux controversy on the right. But if you remember, the national anthem was a part of a controversy with the Colin Kaepernick thing, where he was kneeling during the national anthem. And Colin Kaepernick and the 1619 project are intertwined. The movie was about the 1619. It had that reference, the White Lion ship. And here's the thing. The White Lion ship is what brought the first slaves from Africa. The whole thing was the White Lion ship, 1619. So the movie makes a reference to it. Well, here at the Golden Gate Bridge, there was formerly a monument there called the Francis Scott Key Monument. They called it the Key. And it was vandalized by BLM. And, of course, the significance, Francis Scott Key, national anthem. Well, it was replaced by a monument to the 1619 arrival. And they actually have a monument with like 350 little statues representing those who were brought over. My point being, there's a direct connection between the underlying message of the movie Leave the World Behind. America getting its reckoning, the Tower of Babel falling because of its past sins, its crimes. A reckoning was kind of implied here. And the fact that the Francis Scott Key Monument was replaced by a 1619 monument is very significant and interesting. And now, of course, you have the Golden Gate Bridge being brought into the story. Lean Dion says, the Aus government is coming after X now, claiming it failed to moderate the stabbing stories, planted major influencer accounts played a part in spreading fake leads on the perp's identity and terror motives. Interesting. Now, I've also been saying since last year that X is disease X. Disease X is the hypothetical disease that's going to bring us down. The WHO warned us about it, and I said, no, that's just kind of foreshadowing that it's going to be the mind virus problem that precedes the shutdown. Mind viruses cause extremists to blow something up, and now we have to moderate the mind viruses. And who's the leading purveyor of mind junk again? Elon Musk. Not a coincidence. He's a fall guy for free speech. And this is very consistent with his historic role, reprising Emperor Constantine. And we're living through the part where they're going to start consolidating the Bible. And by Bible, I mean the mainstream media. They're going to ramp up the censorship, and he's part of it. Like, oh, he's fighting for free speech. He's a free speech absolutist. No, this is a controlled demolition of the public commons. All right, moving on. The bridge story, we have cranes falling, another story. German minister threatens indefinite driving bans on weekends. The ruling coalition has been fighting over legislation that sets out binding climate targets. So yeah, they want to coerce people into this. And I've been noticing, I've been checking my health app now, that, of course, it tracks every step. I didn't know this. The entire time I've carried an iPhone, it has counted my every step. And when Musk said that they're going to put rate limits on Twitter so you can only look at 6,000 tweets a day, I'm like, look, you may not use 6,000, but some of us do. And if you accept the premise that they should limit it, eventually you're going to be paying to expand those limits. You're going to be paying tolls on everything. And you'll accept the premise that, hey, you can only walk 5,000 steps a day. Well, I'm looking at this and I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I mean, it's good to know that I have that information, but what is this information going to be used for? Because they could certainly convince a large swath of the population that if you take this many steps, you're a super spreader of carbon, and you need to, step back on that a little bit. Or maybe they could even tax you, like emissions. You pay for your car, California Clean Air Act. I'm like, okay, I got to pay because my car is harming Gaia or whatever. Well, when you're walking around or you're bicycling, maybe you're also taking a toll on Gaia. All right, let's continue through your comments. Fascinating. Interesting little back and forth dialogue in the chat. I'll leave you to it. Just a heads up, we're going to be going on to Fakeologists in a couple of days, and we'll talk about fakeability and standards of evidence, auto-belief versus auto-disbelief. Deepening, I think, and fine-tuning our understanding of media criticism and where it should come from and how claims are made. Check this out. Jarrett Renshaw. Trump says there are 42,000 people here at the rally. There are not anywhere close to that. Daily Beast. Trump's criminal trial begins with vitriol and 42 questions. We've just been talking about the number 42 recently and its correlation with the Terminator. And Trump has been memed as the Terminator frequently, popularly. The whole "I'll be back," and he's also been referred to as a mafia don. And I've been saying that Donald Trump is inextricably connected to the fall of the West. That he is a bad don or Abaddon from Revelation 9:11. If you look at all the Antichrist predictive programming, you can make that connection quite readily. So the 42 with Trump is kind of interesting to see this showing up. All right, we have about 10 more minutes. If anybody wants to get a call in, it's 505-349-0420. We talked about fake pandas yesterday. Interesting, again, another conversation, but the question there is really, to me, are they fakeable at scale? And then it's interesting to look at how somebody arrives at that conclusion. You can arrive at a conclusion if you make your decision based on a limited selection of proofs. So 5 videos to prove somebody is, well, prove that pandas are fake. We'll just go with that. If you judge based on that, then your judgment is impaired because you don't have enough information to say it's fake. And I would call this low information disbelief fallacious and possibly even just lazy, but whatever it is. Low information beliefs, like Mandela effects, these are things where you wouldn't have arrived at that if you had a more complete frame of reference. And that's why I'm again reiterating that what we're doing here isn't prejudging everything is fake. our standards of fake until proven real with extraordinary claims is done with a bit more nuance because we want to arrive at an informed disbelief. Like, I know very well why I don't believe in moon landings. It's not just because NASA lies. There has to be nuance. You have to know both sides. I think it's very important to be aware of both sides and how they arrive at their conclusions. We talked about the disease of face dysmorphia. People are seeing demons, and now there's a trend on TikTok to tell people that you saw somebody turn into a demon. And yeah, TikTok is a interesting place. I rarely go there, but it's a haven for crisis actors. Do-it-yourself crisis acting. You don't work for the deep state, you don't work for the government, but you want to crisis act for clicks and possibly financial rewards. It's all there. If you didn't see this one, this individual is describing how he has seen the demon faces. And he claims that after he saw these, his friend showed him a TikTok video where he learned about it. We played part of this yesterday. Interesting phenomenon. Okay, it is frozen on us. No big deal. We'll get back to that later. I'm still looking into that phenomenon. I find it to be interesting. Some were suggesting, there's a couple different theories on it, that there's going to be some veil lifted, and they need a ready-made explanation for when a lot of us start seeing demons. We think, oh, I must be mentally ill, and then all the people who see the demons can be locked up. So there's this notion, which kind of makes sense. Lickety Split says, okay, enough, let's focus. That's what we're trying to do here. And I had someone say to me, I'm unsubscribing, you think the earth is flat. And yeah, that's fine. But I want to point out that no, I'm not saying the earth is flat. What I'm taking as far as a position here is more of an agnostic position that observably and just honestly speaking, and just everybody, because of what we are, from the human perspective, the earth is apparently flat and stationary. To believe it's a ball in space requires that you trust pathological liars who we constantly catch lying. Pants on fire. They're constantly lying, and they're part of the lie industrial complex. You cannot separate the fakery of the news on the ground from the fakery, quote, above. Now, I won't say that just because NASA is phony science fiction, therefore the earth is flat. No, not at all. But what we can say is that there is an active and ongoing conspiracy to give us a worldview. And that worldview doesn't comport when it comes to the events. Should we trust it when it comes to geography? And if it's not exactly as described, then why can't they show us? Are they hiding land? Are they hiding more land? Is it bigger? There are a lot of questions. So it's not as simple as it's flat, like the Bible says, which I don't even know if the Bible says that. Ted Striker 2112 says, Snoop Dogg saying about seeing demons on Murder was the case, but not sure how many fingers he had in the video. Good tune, though. Yeah, he had like 11 fingers on that fake photo. Interesting. We've spent way too much time, in my opinion, talking about chemtrails. It's time to debate it. There are some things that you're not going to get any further until you make some, I guess, generally agreed upon advances. Like, we can move past this, we can move past that. And I'd like to see what can we move past with that whole conversation. And there are a lot of people who are willing to go as far as to say that maybe it's just geoengineering. So a lot of chemtrailers are jumping to geoengineering, which is an interesting tack, and we can debate that on its own merits later. This is interesting. Steve Bannon hosted an eclipse prayer session to, quote, stop satanic forces coming through. I often talk about how the trad right is all about the moral panic, traditional concepts of sin. They don't believe in virus, they believe in sin. The left is the carrier of sin, and it spreads through social contagion. The left of course, doesn't believe in sin, but they're carriers of it, kind of like the right is carriers of the thing they don't believe in. But they certainly believe in the virus, which they know is being carried by the right because they're anti-vax. You see how that works? And he's mirroring the same type of idiocy that we see from Jack Posobiec and Roger Stone, praying about portals over the White House, pray that it closes. Praying for portals to close. Roger Stone was like, I thought I was in politics, but all this time I was a prayer warrior. Politics was just how God brought me here to shut the portal down. So there's a lot of this talk among the right. Jack Posobiec he's the one who started Pizzagate. He filmed a Pizzagate video at Comet Pizza right before they faked a shooting there. All by design, of course. All discrediting. But the Pizzagate is part of this moral panic. The traditional right, trad right, its concept of sin. In fact, Jack Posobiec has actually adopted the term trad right. But he conducted exorcisms at Dodger Stadium. So to see Steve Bannon hosting Eclipse prayer services to stop satanic forces, look, he doesn't believe this, but he's preaching to people he knows will follow it. Fascinating nonsense, really. Appreciate that support there. Thirst for Truth, Super Chat 999. We are monetized on YouTube for the first time in years. I mean, what's the deal? Is it because I'm suing them? By the way, we're less than a month away from the hearing, IPS versus Google LLC and Marcus Goldfinch. It's not really a hearing, it's a pre-trial, I guess, conference with the judge. And this judge does have specific experience with intellectual property rights, with fraud, with corporations committing fraud. This should be interesting. I'm not sure what their take is going to be. But we're moving the game a step forward in less than a month. And I already know the next move if it doesn't go my way. If they say, oh, we're going to move to this other court because Google and YouTube have headquarters in different counties, sure, they can play that game. It'll just give me a chance to refine my complaints and send them to the appropriate venue if they do that. We're not sure yet. But to me, it's a win-win. It's just like I have a hook. It's like, Moby Dick, the whale. I feel like Captain Ahab at times. I've been chasing this thing since 2018. But when I had that evidence and I had that confession, I took it to the FBI and they were like, okay, well, file it away in a folder. I knew I had a hook in the whale's mouth, that at some point we're going to bring this story to the surface. And I think that time is approaching. Ted Stryker 2112 says, prayers for satanic forces is the same as boiling vinegar for chemtrails. Yes. In a sense, I've actually seen people praying away chemtrails, so there is some overlap. I don't know if anybody has tried boiling vinegar to close satanic portals. I would have to ask Roger Stone. G33 says, hey, Russian letters handle person, what's the translation? I don't think many of us know what your handle is. What you do is you right-click, search, and you just do a quick translate, and you can find out the username. Let's see what it is. His name is, let me translate it into English. That can't be right. Give me just a moment here. I'm trying to translate this person's name. There was a scene in Leave the World Behind where the internet's down and they couldn't translate what the other person was speaking, and so this person was left to die. Real tragic. But it was illustrating the idea that when the Tower of Babel falls, the tongues are scattered. I often talk about the one world, as in the Tower of Babel, one language, the internet. All the nations going from earth to the heavens. Yeah, it's Psyop Skill Sky. I couldn't pronounce it. I was like, Psyop Skill. Lean Dion says, great commenter. I often thought it was a bot. Yeah, definitely great comments by Psyop Skillski. I often find his comments insightful, and anytime I find good comments, I screen cap them and I throw them on my minds.com. It's my notes. If you want to know what we're talking about on any particular day, just go to minds.com/infinite plane society. Now this is interesting. Look at this. So when they first showed us the C-19, I said it looks like the Earth covered in mushroom clouds that are red, suggestive of communists bombing the entire world. It's an image of World War III. It's an icon. That's the first thing I thought when I saw. So I pictured it as World War III, which is very appropriate. We're looking at this zoom in on the coronavirus thing. And I suggest that there's a connection between the nuke situation with a bunch of ground zeros, like it's perfectly analogous. And all the predictive programming for a nuke in Seattle, turns out ground zero was in Seattle for this. Interestingly, though, this article just came out. It said, it's a matter of scale and imagination. COVID, nuclear devastation, and climate catastrophe. This is a documentary that makes this connection between the two, equating them, which is very interesting for a few reasons. But these are analogous constructs. And I think the next thing, of course, we're waiting for is the nuke. I mean, we've been getting a rapid education on what fallout is. Christopher Nolan's brother, Jonathan Nolan, did this Fallout series, which I'm just getting into. And there's nothing on Netflix, there's nothing on Amazon that is there sheerly for your entertainment. It's there for your entrainment to the news cycles. Flatlander Montgomery said, I always thought it looked like sphere Earth surrounded by satellites. Interesting. Well, my first take on it was world covered in red mushroom clouds. And that kind of comports with Sharp Power, the Economist cover, where it says the new shape of Chinese influence. Let me bring this cover up. I referenced it the other day, and this one is classic. This came out in December of 2017. So you have a globe covered in spikes. Looks kind of like a spiky C-19 ball. And it says, Sharp Power, the new shape of Chinese influence. Well, I look at this as novel shape, novel corona. Novel shape of Chinese influenza. Novel influenza, China. And if you look at this spiked globe, it's red where China is. Now, if you can imagine the entire thing red, what would you have? The COVID ball. This is some incredible foreshadowing, predictive programming, what have you. Not the byproduct of AI, randomness, divine inspiration, gremlins. Nope. This is part of the integrated monolithic mind control apparatus that creates our consensus world view. In my opinion, it's up for debate, but it's an ongoing conversation. What accounts for the predictive programming? Is this standard operating procedure, or is this something bigger than we can conceive? I defer to Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is true, and the implication is just because it's indistinguishable from magic doesn't mean it's magic. Can't tell how a magic trick is performed on the stage doesn't mean it's magic. It means I don't know. I need more information. So the conversation of scripting versus sync is ongoing. If you want to add to the discussion, here's a link to yet another John LeBon video. I'm happy to have these conversations. I think it's about time. I look forward to more conjecture and discussion and disagreement. It seems like we only learn stuff when we're disagreeing. At least that's been the pattern that I've experienced. And that's why I look forward to disagreement. It doesn't have to be contentious, acrimonious debate. It can be friendly discourse. And it's not even about agreeing to disagree at all. It's about agreeing to certain standards of evidence and holding to those standards. So I cannot fault somebody for not believing something based on the evidence presented, even if I have anecdotal information that convinces me otherwise. But we'll get to all of that and much more in the near future. Subscribe to the archives. Go to ips.monster. This is Chief Crow, Auto Hoaxer, GTFO. Appreciate all the comments. We'll start earlier tomorrow.